I was born on this land called the South. I had no cradle, only a straw mat in a hut where the air was steeped in the scent of fear and hope. From my first days, I knew only one thing. I was property. My hands were made for work, my back for burdens, and my voice was for silence. My days were scheduled down to the minute, to the breath. Morning met me even before dawn, when the sky was just beginning to gray, chasing away the night shadows. The first crow of the rooster, and then of the overseer, was my alarm clock. Bare feet trod on the cold, still dew-damp earth, heading to the cotton fields. Cotton. Oh, that cotton. It was both my curse and my salvation. White, fluffy bolls, sharp as needles, tore the skin on my fingers. Blood mixed with the whiteness, like flowers blossoming on my palm. Long rows, seemingly endless, stretched to the horizon. The sun climbed higher and higher, scorching mercilessly, and my back ached from endless bending. Not a minute's rest, not a second to breathe. Just pick, pick, pick. The smell of sweat, earth, and dust followed me everywhere. And there were always others nearby, just like me. Our eyes met, full of unspoken words, understanding without words. In those gazes lived a common pain, but also a common resilience. We were each other's shadows, a silent chorus of suffering and hope. In the evening, when the sun dipped towards the horizon, painting the sky in crimson and orange tones, we returned to our huts. Exhaustion weighed us down, but there were still chores ahead. Prepare a meager supper, put the children to bed, if there were any, and then, under the cover of darkness, when the overseers quieted down, our secret rituals began. Whispers of stories passed from mouth to mouth, about freedom, about those who had escaped, about a land where there were no chains. Songs old as Africa itself were sung softly, so as not to wake the masters, but powerfully to awaken our souls. In these songs was a longing for home, for lost freedom, but also an unyielding faith in something better. The smell of the fire, whose smoke mingled with the scent of burnt corn mush, was the smell of home to me. The smell of the night, full of stars, where every rustle seemed a harbinger of something unknown. And then came the days when the world around me changed. Not that anything changed externally. The fields were the same, the work just as exhausting. But something shifted inside me when I saw him. His name was Elijah. He was a new slave, bought from a neighboring plantation. Tall, strong, with eyes full of a fire that seemed capable of burning through any chain. He wasn't like the others. There was a special grace in his movements, and a strength in his silence. I watched him work, saw his muscles strain under the sun. And every time our gazes met, I felt something forbidden unfurl within me, something I feared, yet simultaneously longed for. It was love. Forbidden, dangerous, but so real. It bloomed like a wild flower in the most barren soil. Our meetings were rare, stolen from the night. We exchanged words that were more like sighs than speech. He told me about his life before the plantation, about his mother, about the sister's fate had separated him from. His voice was low, deep, and in it I heard the echo of his pain, but also an unwavering hope. I, in turn, told him about my fears, about how I dreamed of freedom, about how it sometimes felt like I was suffocating from this life. He listened attentively, holding my hand, and in his touch there was such tenderness that I forgot everything else in the world. These moments were everything to me. They were light in the impenetrable darkness, a breath of air in a stuffy room. But such a relationship could not go unnoticed. The master, an old, fat planter with eyes full of greed, always watched his slaves carefully. His eyes were everywhere, like a spider weaving its web. And then one day, after an especially hot day, when Elijah and I dared to stay a little longer under the stars, the overseer caught us. His cry sliced through the night's silence like a knife. My heart froze. I knew what awaited us. Punishment. Cruel. Humiliating. But even at that moment, with fear gripping my body, I could not tear my eyes from Elijah. He stood tall, unbowed, and in his eyes there was not a trace of fear, only defiance. That gaze gave me the strength to endure what was about to happen. They dragged us to the barn. I heard screams, saw other slaves hiding in the shadows, not daring to look up. The master stood there, his face distorted with malice. He shouted curses, and then ordered Elijah to be whipped. Every lash of the whip that cut his back echoed with pain in my heart. I bit my lips until they bled, to keep from screaming, to keep from showing them my weakness. Elijah made no sound. He stood like a rock, and only his clenched jaw betrayed his pain. When it was all over, he fell to the ground, but even then his gaze did not break. He looked up at me, and in his eyes was a tenderness full of promises. And in that moment, I understood that no whips, no chains could break what was between us. Our love was stronger than their hatred. It was our shield, our light in that impenetrable darkness. After that night, life changed. The overseer, it seemed, reported everything to the master, and our stolen meetings became practically impossible. Elijah was moved to other tasks, farther from the cotton fields where I worked. This was their way to separate us, to break our will. But they didn't know that love doesn't tear into pieces like old cloth. It goes deep into the most hidden corners of the soul and continues to live there, nourishing you from within. I saw Elijah only in glimpses when he returned from the field or when our paths accidentally crossed at the well. We exchanged only glances, but in those glances there was so much pain, so much tenderness, so many unspoken words, that it seemed to me as if we were talking for an entire eternity. Days stretched on, one after another, resembling each other like raindrops. The work grew harder, and the food scarcer. Hunger became my constant companion, whispering in my ear about an unbearable longing for fullness, for a simple piece of bread. Sometimes, when I felt my strength leaving me, I closed my eyes and imagined a different life. A life where I was free, where there were no overseers, no fields, no whip. I imagined myself running through tall grass, the wind tangling in my hair, laughing, truly laughing, without fear. These moments were my salvation, my fortress, where I could hide from the cruel reality. I often asked myself, had God abandoned us? Did he not see our suffering, our tears? But then I remembered Elijah, his unwavering gaze, and I understood that hope lives, even when it seems that all is lost. One day, when the sun stood high in the sky, scorching my back, I saw something that made my heart clench in horror. Old May, a neighbor from the hut, the one who always sang the saddest songs, was kneeling before the master. He was screaming at her, his face red with rage. May was already old, and her hands, disfigured by decades of work, trembled. She had dropped her cotton basket, and several bowls scattered on the ground. The master, without saying a word, raised his whip. The first strike, the second, I closed my eyes, unable to watch. But her screams, piercing and full of pain, penetrated through my closed eyelids, tearing my soul apart. When I opened my eyes again, May was lying on the ground, and the master, satisfied, had left. We rushed to her, but it was too late. Her eyes were open, but there was no life in them. She had died, simply because she dropped cotton. This moment became a turning point. I understood that a slave's life was worth nothing. Today it was May, tomorrow it could be me, or Elijah, or someone else. On that day, something changed inside me. Fear didn't disappear, but to it was mixed a cold, burning rage that promised I wouldn't surrender without a fight. After May's death, the atmosphere on the plantation became even more tense. The master intensified his oversight, as if he wanted to show us who was in charge here. Every day was a test of endurance. I became even more cautious, trying not to attract attention, not to give a reason for punishment. But something was growing inside me that could not be controlled, a thirst for freedom. It became my obsession, my only dream. I thought about it constantly, falling asleep and waking up. I imagined how one day I would escape, how I would see the world beyond this plantation. I didn't know where to go, what to do, but I knew one thing: I had to try. And then one day, quite unexpectedly, something happened that changed my life forever. I was working in the master's garden when I overheard a conversation. It was the master and some unknown man, dressed in expensive clothes. They spoke quietly, but I managed to catch fragments of phrases. Debt sell. Elijah. My heart plummeted. They were going to sell Elijah. I stood still, afraid to move, so as not to give myself away. My hands trembled, and one word pounded in my head. No. They couldn't do this. They couldn't take away my only hope, the only thing that connected me to this world. The men continued their conversation, and I understood that Elijah was going to be sold at auction in 3 days. 3 days. I had only 3 days to come up with something. I didn't sleep that night. My mind worked feverishly, sifting through all possible options. Escape? Where? How? Alone? Without food? Without money? And how would I find Elijah, even if I did escape? Despair washed over me in waves. But then I remembered his eyes, his strength, his faith, and I understood that I couldn't give up. I had to do something. I had a plan. Risky, insane, but it was my only chance. I decided to ask for help from old John, the cook. He was already advanced in age, but had lived on the plantation longer than anyone else, and many said he had connections to the Underground Railroad, a network of secret paths and shelters for runaway slaves. This was my last chance, my only thread that could lead me to freedom. I waited for night to fall to speak with John. Each hour felt like an eternity. When the sun finally dipped below the horizon, I quietly crept towards his cabin. The scent of herbs and old tobacco hung in the air. John sat by the fire. His face, etched with wrinkles, seemed even more mysterious in the flickering firelight. I approached closer, and he lifted his wise eyes to me. Understanding was etched in them. He must have known what brought me here. John, I whispered, I need your help. My voice trembled, but I tried to steady myself. I told him everything, about Elijah's sale, about my plans, about my desperation. John listened to me in silence, not interrupting, only nodding his head occasionally. When I finished, he looked at the fire for a long time, and then he spoke, his voice quiet, yet firm. Child, the path to freedom is difficult and dangerous. Many have tried, and not all have reached their goal. But he who does not try will never know the taste of freedom. He told me about the Underground Railroad, not an actual railroad, but a secret network of people who helped slaves escape to the north. He knew one of the conductors who was supposed to be near the plantation in 2 nights. This was our only chance. The plan was simple, but full of dangers. We were to meet the conductor in a secluded spot at the edge of the swamp, 3 miles from the plantation. On the night before the auction, John gave me an old map drawn on a scrap of fabric and said that it indicated places where I could find shelter and food. He also gave me some dried meat and water, specially gathered by him for such occasions. My heart pounded like a bird in a cage. Hope, so fragile and almost forgotten, came alive in me again. The next 2 days were torture. I tried to behave as usual, worked in the fields, ate my meager food, but every minute felt endless. I searched for Elijah with my eyes, trying to convey a message to him without words. But he was far away, on the other side of the plantation, and our paths did not cross. In the evening, before the decisive night, I lay down on my straw mat and looked at the stars for a long time. I prayed. I prayed for strength, for courage, for everything to work out for us. I imagined our life in freedom, where we could love each other without fear, where our children would be born free. This dream gave me strength. And then it came, the night of escape. The sky was dark, moonless, as if nature itself sympathized with us and hid our steps. I quietly got up, put on my oldest and darkest clothes to blend with the shadows. My heart pounded so hard that it seemed its beat would wake everyone on the plantation. I cautiously left the hut, trying not to make a single sound. The air was damp and heavy, filled with the scent of the swamp. I moved by touch, orienting myself by the stars and the barely visible landmarks that John had indicated on the map. Every rustle in the bushes made me flinch. Every snap of a twig underfoot sounded like a gunshot. I constantly looked back, expecting the overseer to catch me at any moment. The night forest was full of sounds: the chirping of cicadas, the cries of night birds, the splash of water in the swamp. These sounds, usually so familiar, now seemed ominous. I walked forward, without stopping, despite my tiredness and fear. My bare feet repeatedly hit roots and stones, but I paid no attention to it. Only one thought pounded in my head: freedom. After some time, when I had already begun to despair, I saw a faint light in the distance. It was a signal. I quickened my pace, almost running, despite the pain in my feet. When I got closer, I saw a figure standing by a small fire. It was the conductor, a tall, thin man with kind eyes. Elijah stood next to him. My heart froze, and then beat with double force. He was here. He was waiting for me. We rushed to each other. And in our embrace was all the pain of separation, all the anxiety of waiting, all the hope for the future. It was the most precious moment in my life. The conductor wasted no time. He said we had little time, and we had to go. We moved on, deep into the swamp where no one could find us. The path was difficult. We pushed through thick thickets, ankle-deep in sticky mud, through streams and swampy areas. Mosquitoes bit mercilessly, but we paid no attention to them. The main thing was to go forward, not to stop, not to look back. Through the fog, I saw his back, his broad shoulders, and that sight gave me strength. We walked all night until dawn broke. When the first rays of the sun pierced through the trees, we finally stopped at a small, abandoned hut. The conductor said this was our first refuge. Here we could rest and wait out the day. The hut was dark and damp, but it was our first own place where we were safe. We fell to the ground, exhausted but happy. A long and dangerous journey awaited us, but we were together, and that was the main thing. The hut became our first home on the path to freedom. It was small, dirty, but for us, it was a palace. We slept pressed close to each other, and for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. The sun, piercing through the cracks in the walls, seemed gentle and kind, not like on the plantation where it burned to the bone. The conductor, whose name was Samuel, turned out to be a silent but reliable man. He brought us some dried meat and flatbreads, which seemed to me the most delicious food in the world. We stayed in the hut for 2 days until Samuel said it was time to move on. The journey was long and dangerous. We walked at night, hiding from view, resting during the day in secluded places, abandoned sheds, forest thickets, under bridges. Every step was difficult. Our feet were worn, our clothes torn, and hunger became a constant companion. But we did not give up. Elijah supported me when I felt my strength leaving me. He whispered words of love and hope to me, and those words were stronger than any food. We talked about the future, about how we would live when we were free, about how we would build our own home where there would be no chains, where our children would grow up in peace and quiet. These conversations nourished our souls and gave us the strength to move forward. One night, as we walked along the edge of a field, we heard dogs barking. My heart froze. We knew what that meant. These were slave catchers. Samuel grabbed our hands and pulled us into the nearest forest. We ran without picking our way. Branches lashed our faces, roots caught at our feet. The barking of the dogs grew louder, closer. I felt panic engulf me, but Elijah held my hand tightly, and his touch calmed me. We reached a small stream and plunged into the water. Samuel said that water threw off the dog's scent. We walked along the stream until we felt the danger had passed. Our feet were frozen, our clothes soaked through, but we were alive. We came out of the water and continued our journey, now even more cautious. The journey was full of such dangers. Once we almost stumbled upon a patrol. Another time we had to hide in a rotting pile of leaves while a wagon with armed men passed over us. Every day was a struggle for survival. But amidst all this pain and fear, there were also moments when I felt truly alive. For example, when we were hiding in some forest and Elijah found wild berries, and we ate them laughing like children, or when we sat by the fire, and I told him about my dreams, and he looked at me with such love that it seemed to me that the whole world disappeared, and only the two of us remained. Samuel led us to a house that seemed ordinary, but was part of the Underground Railroad. The owner of the house was an elderly white woman named Esther. Her eyes were full of compassion, and her hands, despite her age, were strong. She fed us, gave us clean clothes, and allowed us to rest. For the first time in a long time, we slept in a bed, not on the bare ground. Esther's house was a refuge, a place where one could feel human. She told us stories about other fugitives, about those who reached the north, and about those who died along the way. Her stories gave us hope, but also reminded us of the price paid for freedom. We spent 3 days at Esther's, gathering strength for the final push. She gave us a little money, though I didn't know what to spend it on. She said that in the North, we should be careful because racism wouldn't disappear, but there was a chance to start a new life there. Before we left, she hugged us, and in her embrace, I felt a warmth I hadn't known since childhood. The last leg of the journey was the hardest. We crossed the border, and I felt a huge burden lift from me. I was free, truly free, but the world in the North was different, not as I had imagined it. It was noisy, bustling, full of unfamiliar faces. People looked at us with curiosity, sometimes with disdain, sometimes with sympathy. I felt lost in this new world. We found work, but it was hard work for meager wages. We had to live in a cramped, dirty room, and every day was a struggle for survival. But we were together, and that was the main thing. Elijah and I, we held on to each other, supporting each other through difficult times. We learned to read and write, slowly getting used to this new world. We dreamed of one day having our own home, where we could live peacefully, where our children would go to school and would not know what slavery was. Years passed, year after year. Like leaves falling from trees, they carried away the pain of the past, but did not erase it completely. We worked tirelessly. I learned to sew. Elijah found work as a porter at the docks. Every coin earned was not just money to us, but a brick in the wall of our future. We saved, denying ourselves everything, to one day buy our own small piece of land, our own home, a home where there would be no prying eyes, where we could breathe freely. Life in the North, though free, was not easy. We faced prejudice and animosity. Sometimes people cast sideways glances at us. Sometimes we heard whispers behind our backs, but we learned to ignore it. Our freedom was too precious to let outside words overshadow it. We held onto each other, and our love, forged in trials, grew even stronger. It was our beacon in this vast, unfamiliar world. We often remembered the past, but without bitterness. Rather, with gratitude for having survived, for having reached this shore. We told each other stories about the plantation, about old friends, about those who remained there, in chains. And every time we remembered May, I felt a cold rage that wouldn't let me forget that slavery is an evil that must be destroyed. We understood that our freedom was not only our personal achievement, but also a debt to those who never broke free. We had children, a boy, whom we named Samuel in honor of the conductor who helped us escape, and a girl named after my mother, whom I barely remembered. Their laughter filled our small home with light and joy. We told them stories of our lives, of the struggle for freedom, of how important it was to cherish every moment, every breath, every ray of sunshine. We taught them to read and write, taught them to dream, taught them to be strong and not to give up in the face of difficulties. We wanted them to know their history, so they would never forget where they came from and the price their parents paid for their freedom. Elijah always said that freedom is not only the absence of chains, but also a state of mind. It is the right to choose, to dream, to have a voice. And we lived by that principle. We weren't rich, but we were free. We could work where we wanted, live where we wanted, speak what we wanted. We could love without fear of punishment. This was the greatest wealth. Time passed. Elijah grew old, his hair turned gray, and his hands became even stronger, yet more worn. I myself grew old, but the fire in my eyes did not extinguish. We saw the world changing around us. Slavery was abolished, and that was the greatest achievement. But we knew that the fight for equality was not over yet. We watched our children grow as they fought for their rights, for their voices to be heard. Now, as I sit by the window, watching the sunset, I often think about the past, about the pain, the losses, the fear. But most of all, I think about the love that saved me, about the strength of spirit that did not allow me to break, about the hope that guided me through the darkness. I do not know what the future holds for us, but I know one thing. As long as love lives in our hearts, as long as we remember our history, we will be strong. I whisper my truth to you through time. Listen carefully. Perhaps in my story, you will find echoes of your own struggle, your own hopes. Perhaps my whisper will become a light for you in your own darkness. And remember, freedom is not a gift, but a conquest, and it must be cherished, protected, and passed down from generation to generation.